Every second Wednesday, we take a look at things happening in the world of education. We do that with our Professor of Education from the University of Newcastle, John Fischetti, who always puts me to shame in the fashion stakes, Mark in a black T-shirt.
Yeah, no contest today.
Here he is. Look at this bloke here. It's worth a he has literally stepped out of a men's fashion magazine, and one of the good ones. The school year might be closing down, but not so much for this bloke here. Now, John, industrial action for a lot of teachers this week. So can you take us through what that was all about and some of the issues that we'll see unfolding as a result of that?
Yeah, sure, Mark. Good morning and happy holidays to everybody. 2 years ago, you might not have imagined that where we'd be today would be how increased in most parents' mind the value of teachers is, right? Because of all of what we've done through COVID, the lockdowns and the teaching from home and the Zooms, parents have, and most of society has even a greater appreciation for the absolute phenomenal contributions of teachers. Coming back out of this, if that's where we are, teachers are worried that we're going to go back to where we were before. An increased level of stress on teachers, relatively low pay to comparable professions, and increasing working conditions that probably aren't desirable with, believe it or not, a massive teacher shortage ahead. Put those together, and yesterday around New South Wales, but particularly in Sydney, there was a strike.
So let's look at the one thing that is probably a real ongoing thing, and that is conditions. So, I mean, and we hear that word, but in regards to the schoolyard, what does that actually mean, John? Because you go into a job and you kind of know what the pay is, and it's we always want more. I understand that, but what are some of the things that can be done in that practical sense that would make those in that profession feel that, you know what, it's a better day coming to work?
Well, I think first of all, teachers don't come into it for the money, and you're absolutely right. I don't think the money is actually the solution. We'll get to that in a minute. But over the last several years, particularly in some suburbs around New South Wales, the conditions of the communities has gotten worse off. You have guests all the time talking about the conditions of our society, whether it's the poverty or the increased stress on families or domestic violence or the alcohol issues. Those all manifest themselves through kids in schools. And when they come to school with those, a teacher's job is to teach them the content, but they end up having to interact as mental health support, friends, guides, coaches, counselors in many respects. So a teacher's job is now bigger than it was before. And our challenge as a society, which is the second point, is we really can't have any kid be a slacker anymore. There's nothing to do if you're undereducated. What are you going to do? The machine will take your job if it hasn't already. So we really have to get every child to be successful. Just at the time, we're looking a little bit more like a borough in London or a state in the U.S. in terms of the conditions of working class families and kids in schools, putting a lot of pressure on really altruistic people coming into teaching.
So strictly numbers part of the equation? I know they'll be part of the equation, but we also maybe need different types of people working within schools, because you mentioned that whole mental health and that whole support, which, you know, comes from conditions in society. Do we need more of those people as a part of the school?
Great question. Great question, Mark. There's sort of three factors going on. One is an increased number of baby boomers now retiring, so that was already predictable. We, in addition to that, have a little bit of a baby glut that's coming through, a baby boomlet of sorts coming through New South Wales due to government incentives for kids now. A generation ago, they're making their way through the system. That's multiple thousands of extra kids. We don't have the same immigrant population, but we do. Those that were here have increased. And we have the unfortunate notion that the conditions of teaching aren't great, chasing some of our top school leavers away from teaching. That has changed a bit during COVID because we have much more appreciation and love for teaching. So if we turn this into a little bit more positive aspect of education, we might be able to recruit them back. Massive teacher shortage in the next 5 years. There won't be enough people. There aren't enough casual math teachers today. There's no school that has any to ring up. So in certain disciplines, we actually don't have teachers today. In some of the areas, we're doing fine, but in 3 to 4 years, we'll need between 4,000 and 10,000 more teachers in New South Wales than the supply will allow. And that means who's going to be in front of your child that's a fully qualified teacher.
What about the idea of schools themselves? Do we have enough actual schools in our region? So I have this thought with health and hospitals, right, that in the Hunter, as an example, we have basically the same amount of hospital capacity as we did in the 50s, but yet a ton more people. So where we sit in the actual number of schools? We have enough, not enough, just about right?
We're actually, because of the glut of students, the increased number of kids, we're running out of space. There are some schools in the listening area here that are actually over populated with kids and teachers. They're running out of space. And in some communities, that space needs a massive refurb because the buildings are out of the 70s. They don't have heat or air. They're actually not
I still can't get my head around that.
they're
We don't
they're
have air
not
conditioning,
equipped.
but
They're
anyway.
not equipped really for the kind of technology that we really need in schools and the creature comforts. So two good answers to your question, Mark. One is the conditions aren't great, and we do have a problem. A lot of the money that was going to go into the refurbs of schools has been redirected into the COVID safe practices and extra tutoring. So the government schools had some money associated with that that's been moved down the road a little bit to pay for the extra costs of trying to manage through the pandemic.
All right, a few things to look at there. I mean, yes, obviously pay rises are always good, and that might be the cheapest part of the equation.
Yeah, I don't think a 5% salary increase, if they got it, 2.5% is what's mandated, is going to get us there. But the good news is the power of being an educator is so profoundly positive, and it's such a great thing to do because it's so altruistic. You just love it every day that I think we just have to turn the image around to where we encourage our top students to say, you know what, you'd be a great teacher, and we can fix the problem overnight. It's about our public perception and how we translate it into practice.
Well, you can tell this bloke loves it. He turns up in a suit, tie, best suit you'll ever see in town, just to come and talk to us every couple of weeks. Our Professor of Education. He does have a couple of things to do as well today. From the University of Newcastle, John Fischetti. We'll talk to you next time, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.